The key requirement for creativity is this aspect of utility. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that for something to be considered creative, it has to be useful in the practical sense. But it does seem that for something to be considered truly creative, or especially creative in some cases, that it reveals to us something fundamental about the way that we or the world works. We discussed some of the neural circuits that underlie the different aspects of creativity, in particular divergent and convergent thinking, as well as narrative building, and some of the tools and steps that can allow us to better access divergent thinking and convergent thinking. And those tools include behavioral tools as well as pharmacology. And we talked about narrative building as a way to reawaken, or I should say, reaccess the childhood creativity that did indeed exist in all of us at some point in time. If you're learning from and or enjoying this podcast, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's a terrific zero-cost way to support us. In addition, please subscribe to the podcast on Spotify and Apple. And on both Spotify and Apple, you can leave us up to a 5-star review. If you have questions for us or comments about the podcast or suggestions about guests that you'd like us to interview on the Huberman Lab podcast, please put those in the comment section on YouTube. We do read all the comments. Please also check out the sponsors mentioned at the beginning and at various times during today's episode. That's the best way to support this podcast. As mentioned at the beginning of today's podcast, we've partnered with Momentous Supplements because Momentous Supplements are the very highest quality. They have single ingredient formulations, which turns out to be most effective in building a supplement protocol. And when I say most effective, I mean most biologically effective and most cost effective. And we're fortunate that they ship internationally because we know that many of you reside outside of the United States. If you want to check out the supplements mentioned in today's and in other episodes of the Huberman Lab podcast, supplements that are aimed at enhancing sleep, enhancing focus, hormone support, etc., you can go to Live Momentous, spelled O-U-S. So it's livemomentous.com/Huberman. If you haven't already subscribed to the Huberman Lab Podcast Neural Network newsletter, this is a monthly newsletter that is completely zero cost, that has summaries of particular podcast episodes, as well as toolkits for things like enhancing sleep, enhancing focus, dopamine, deliberate cold exposure, and many other topics important to the listeners of the Huberman Lab Podcast. If you'd like to join the newsletter, please go to hubermanlab.com, click on the menu and go to newsletter. You provide your email to us. We do not share your email with anybody else. And as I already mentioned, it is completely zero cost. If you're not already following us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and or LinkedIn, please do so. It is Huberman Lab on all platforms. On all those social media platforms, I describe science and science-related tools, some of which overlap with the content of the Huberman Lab podcast, but often which does not overlap with the content of the Huberman Lab podcast. Again, it's Huberman Lab on all platforms.